Hi, my name is Rachel and I work on the marketing team here at Colonial Gardens. One of my favorite things about working here at Colonial is all of the access to fresh produce that we have. And it is apple time. Our apple trees have created some great apples that we've gotten, and we also carry apples in our market. So one of the things that I like to make with apples is applesauce. It's probably one of my favorite and easiest recipes that I have in my kitchen. I know you're probably thinking applesauce doesn't sound easy, really time consuming, but thanks to the Crockpot here, I can throw all of my ingredients in my Crockpot, and in about 3 or 4 hours, I have delicious applesauce that I've made. I can control all of my sugars and salts and flavorings. So today I'm going to teach you how to make a Crockpot applesauce. So for this recipe, what you're going to need is, of course, apples. I've got 10 apples here, but I do have a little bit smaller crock pot. So if you have a bigger crock pot, obviously you can use 12 or 14 apples. And if you have an even smaller crock pot than I do, you can use fewer apples, 5 or 6. So just depending on the size of your crock pot is how you want to gauge how many apples you'll need. Like I said, I have 10 here for the size of crock pot. What I also have is white sugar. I have about a half a cup of white sugar. I do have a few tablespoons of brown sugar. I think it just gives it a little bit different sweetness. I have cinnamon, a splash of vanilla, and I do have a lemon here that I'm going to juice and use the lemon juices out of. So right now what I'm doing is peeling, and I'm going to cut and core my 10 apples. I'm going to throw those in the crock pot along with the rest of my ingredients. So if you have a different kind of apple peeler, one that peels and cores at the same time, you can use that. I prefer to do my peeling by hand and then chopping just so that I can make sure that all of my apple slices are uniform. So I am just going to continue peeling and chopping my apples here. Okay, so I've almost got all of my apples finished chopping, and what I've done here is just core my apples. You can use an apple corer if you have one, but otherwise I've just peeled these guys, cored them, and then I'm just giving them a really rough chop. They're almost bite-sized cubed pieces. But just make sure whatever you do, they're all uniform. So if you do all cubes, you want to stick with all cubes. If you do slices, then just stick with all your slices. So I've got all my apples thrown into my crock pot. Again, I did 10 apples for this size of crock pot I have. If you have a bigger one, use more apples. If you have a smaller one, use less apples. I also used apples that are kind of ugly. So maybe they have a blemish on them, they have a spot. You really don't need those. So go ahead and throw whatever apples in here that you have that you might pick up. So then the rest of my ingredients here, I'm going to need a lemon juice. So I've got a half a lemon here that I'm just going to squeeze right in. And this just brightens up the flavor a little bit of my apples. And then I've got my half a cup of granulated sugar. I've got my 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. I've got a cinnamon because we can't have anything apple without cinnamon. And then I've got just a splash of vanilla here that I'm going to throw in. So I'm going to mix all this up in my crock pot, and then what I'm going to do is set my crock pot on high, and I'm going to leave mine for about 3 hours. I'll come back and check it. All right, so it's been about 3.5 hours that my apples have been going in my crock pot, and you can see they're really bubbly and it's warm. You want to open your crock pot and stir the apples up a little bit. They should be pretty juicy, and the apples should be really soft by now. So you just want to go ahead and stir this up, and we can turn off our crock pot. And then you'll just want this to set just a little bit longer so that these apples have more of a chance to set up. It'll soak up just a little bit more of that liquid. You can put it in the fridge or just leave it sit out on your counter for a little bit. And it should be more of an applesauce consistency. You can also take like a potato masher to it or just a big fork and kind of break up a little more of those chunks depending on how chunky or how fine you like your applesauce. So at this point, we'll just go ahead and put the lid back on it. Let it get to room temperature, maybe throw it in the refrigerator for just a little bit. All right, so our applesauce has been in the fridge for about an hour or so, and it's cooled down. You can go ahead and eat it now. You can let it refrigerate a little bit longer, but we do have nice applesauce. Depending on how chunky or how fine you like your applesauce, like I said, you can take an immersion blender to it. You can take a potato masher, just a fork, and crush it up just a little bit more to make it a little finer. I do like my applesauce just a little chunkier, but otherwise we have applesauce, delicious applesauce. applesauce in just about 3 or 4 hours. So I hope everybody enjoys. Come into Colonial Gardens. We do have our produce on sale, which includes our apples, so make sure to get some apples. Make this delicious applesauce and let us know how it turns out.